There's a sign-in sheet I'm just going to pass around. If you haven't signed in already, please do. Here. My name is Michelle Bettis. I'm one of the co-champions of this group along with Lisa. And I'm pleased to introduce Andrew. I think most of you may already know him. He's not a stranger to this group. He was one of the co-champions for many years before Lisa and I took over.
Yep.
And,
together with Anne-Marie, who's sitting back there.
Yeah, and so Andrew's currently with Manulife. And he's going to talk to us about shifting roles in a large company. Is it specifically with large companies or just any? Any traditional?
We cover them all.
Great.
And this is posted, it will be posted on YouTube, so we don't have to take notes.
Do not have to take notes because George is doing his YouTube master.
Can I turn the camera to you? I have privacy issues.
Does anybody object if their face shows up on a YouTube video that George creates?
No, my fault if the lens cracks.
Great. So,
just one last thing. So we always pick this space because it's like the only restaurant that allows us to use a private room without a minimum spend. So I invite you all to purchase a drink or some food because we don't have a budget for this group. So just to support the business here. Thank you. We're doing all this.
So I'm going to apologize once at the beginning of this talk for coughing, because that may happen during the course of this talk, so please forgive me. So the genesis of this talk was really a lot of conversations which crop up in the course of my work, which is helping a large organization adopt Agile principles and practices. And along the way, I get asked almost continually, if not daily, by people this question: what is my role in this new Agile world? Because I don't see my job title listed in any of the kind of jobs that Agile describes. And so that led to a lot of different explanations, and it finally gelled into this. So what I'm going to do is talk about how I hold those conversations. I hope it will be useful to you, and I'd like actually to hear back from you about, does this make sense? Is this what you're seeing? Or this really doesn't apply to my particular situation? Because I'd like to make this useful to more people. So, tech has failed me today, or some tech has failed me today. My little controller is on the fritz. But I have other tech that is actually working, so let's see. I can wander around. This is amazing. So this slide is courtesy of my very talented and lovely wife, who often gives presentations, and then people look at her slides afterwards and go, what is this all about? So because this is kind of conversational, I'll include this in the slide deck. Also, if you have a question, please ask it, like just interrupt, and we'll deal with it, and if it's something bigger, we'll deal with it later. Oops, let's go here. Who am I? All of these things, I'm currently working at Manulife. So I've been testing these ideas in lots of large organizations. And here's the idea. I think it's really important that we talk with people about what they bring to the organization, what they bring to the team, what contribution they can kind of make, instead of inferring it from a label that we put on them because that's their job title. And people get all wrapped up in job titles because they infer status and they infer, you can infer things from the job title, but it's much more important to actually know, I think, and organize around what people can do. And so this sounds like so blindingly obvious, such a small idea, like how could we possibly talk about this for more than 10 minutes? And it is a simple idea, but it's not a small one. We try to abstract too many things in our life, and what I'm advocating today is that we get more obvious about it. So when I look at organizations, and they can be big organizations or small ones, I kind of see three areas of focus. So this is my simplification. So the first one is really this idea that there's a bunch of people who worry about product. There's a focus in any organization around some product, and for product you can substitute service, whatever it is we're hoping to get money from our customers. And there's a bunch of jobs associated with that. So we typically see these kinds of job labels or role labels. And so product manager, business analyst, they worry about the product. Customer advocates, so salespeople or relationship managers, they worry about products. And so you see these kind of job titles. There's another domain of focus that's around delivery. How do we actually satisfy these customers? What do we do? What do we make? And there's a bunch of, in the Agile world, job titles or role titles that are associated with that. So Scrum Masters, team leads, your list may differ, but I want to give you a sense of the kinds of job titles or role titles that are associated with delivery. And they're different from those that are associated with defining and monitoring the market, defining product for a market. And the third area of focus is the organization itself. How do we organize ourselves in order to have enough money, pay people, make sure that people who want us to behave realize that we're behaving. So compliance, other regulatory bodies, people who worry about are we biting off too big a chunk, so risk people, all fall in this kind of, this domain of focus. So we start to see these kinds of job titles that are focused on organizational issues. So program managers and project managers and risk managers, people who buy things on behalf of the company, whether it's capabilities from other organizations or teams or other physical things. And then people who are worried about money, they tend to fall into the organizational domain. And it's always a mix of these things that constitute an organization or a company. There are other things, of course, that don't fall into this really simple model, but clearly they don't matter because I'm not paying attention to them.
What about developers?
They're down here in the delivery world. Just didn't make it on my list, so I'll get rid of that CTO because developers are much more important.
They really are.
They really are. So thank you for that. But does this kind of high-level distinction make sense to people? Is that what you see when you look at organizations? Are there things that I'm missing, like egregiously missing, obviously missing?
You have the same structure for a startup?
I'll show how we can, so this is like a 3-ball or 3-circle Venn diagram, and my hypothesis is we can describe almost any organization by moving the balls around. You buy that?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. So these different domains do different things. So they have different focus. So product people, they want to delight customers so that customers give us all their money. And so these are the kinds of jobs. The delivery folks, they want to grow awesome teams. They want the organization to be the most capable that it possibly can at creating great products. And The organizational folks, well, they have a different goal or a different set of activities that they need to pursue. They want to make the organization as efficient as possible. They want to navigate all of the white space. If you look at an organizational hierarchy, it doesn't really tell you how the work is getting done. The white space between the lines on an organizational chart is where relationships happen and work actually gets performed. So being effective organizationally means being able to navigate that white space. And again, here's the kind of people who do that. There's a set of activities that are very common in each of these domains. So in the product domain, we start to see these kinds of things where people are focused on being able to articulate what our products do, what their benefits are. There's some kind of product vision. And they support that with things like customer research and trying to validate that we're really solving a problem that's worthwhile solving, or discovering a problem that we haven't solved yet that might be really fruitful for us to pursue. So you often see competitor or market studies being conducted in this domain. We articulate what we find with journey mapping and with story mapping or process mapping. But the end result is, of all of the things that we could possibly do, we want some kind of priority list. Let's do this first because it's the most valuable thing. So there's an evaluation process going on because there's likely an infinite number of things that we could choose to do or choose from to do. And once we sort out a strategy about how we're going to go to market or what customers we're going to pursue or what features we're going to have in our product set, this really kind of constitutes a strategy. The strategy is just a bunch of words on paper until we sort of deploy it somehow. We need to turn that strategy into action. So I've stolen this wonderful term called strategy deployment, how we turn ideas into action. And that's really a focus area for this domain of activity. Yep.
The business requirements fit here?
Yeah.
After customer research? Or?
Well, hopefully after customer research, but in my experience, I've seen business requirements that are completely divorced from customer research. So it's like somebody's really good idea gets to the top of the pile somehow. So in order to do this kind of work, people need to have some kind of skill. And what is that? So here's a sample list. Your list will be longer, I know, but they're really around, we're talking to different groups of people to get a sense of, make sense of a market opportunity or make sense of a problem. So facilitation, for me, just pops to the top of the list. If you have people in this role and they can't facilitate a conversation, a meeting, a focus group, they can't elicit the needs of people and really deeply understand them, then we might make some bad choices in this product area. So facilitation and needs elicitation, top items. And generally, although we don't say those words out loud, they're fundamental skills of business analysts. That's what business analysts do. They go around and talk to people and dig and ask questions and document exactly what people want to have in a product or a service or some kind of process behavior. This is the job of business analysts. And their skill is business analysis. There's also data analysis and research. Visualization is kind of the end result of really good facilitation. If you can make it clear to other people what's valuable and what's less valuable, then better decisions can be made. and kind of visualization techniques that we encounter every day, especially in the Agile world, are story writing and grouping those stories together to form a narrative, story mapping. So this is just a subset, but I want to get people focused not so much on the job title from which you infer all these things, but the actual skills. What do people do? So the same thing happens in this domain. We can decompose it into a set of skills. So what do people do? They actually create things. These are the makers of our organization. And sometimes they're working with physical goods, and sometimes they're working with digital goods, virtual goods, and sometimes they're working just with process, which brings procedure alive. But the kinds of other things they do, they orchestrate lots of different moving parts so that something is consumable. They validate that they're building the right thing. They integrate lots of different pieces or lots of different processes. They spend a lot of time worrying about operationalization. It's not enough to just create the thing, but how do we operate the organization so that it can be delivered, be supported, be upgraded, be replaced, whatever operations means to you. So for some companies, this is the heart of their activity, or a significant portion of it. For other people, operationalization is not such a big deal. But ultimately, it's the delivery people who deploy things, actual consumable service or product that people pay money for. So what kind of skills do you think people need for that? Here's my list. Your list may be different. They need to be able to analyze things too. Maybe in a different way or from a different perspective, but when you give a set of requirements to a developer, they're going to sit down and design an application. They're not going to design a solution. They're going to design their application or their code to make that thing come to life. They need to be able to decompose the work and design how they're going to respond to requirements and do the actual development. And there's testing in here, and there's deployment, and there's coordination, and again, that really important skill of making the work visible. So it's not enough to have a fantastic design for an application in your head. If you can't communicate that to people and they understand what their piece of it is, or how they plug into it, or what the consequences of organizing the solution in a certain way is, then the likelihood is that you're going to run into some deployment issues down the line. So none of these things are exhaustive. I'm just trying to move the focus off of what do we need to be able to do in order to do the things we need. Is this making sense? I'm seeing some nodding heads.
Regarding analysis, isn't the technical requirements part of that?
And it's these delivery folks who would focus on analyzing the technical implementation of a set of business requirements.
Because sometimes you need to analyze the risk for the project, and for that you need to prototype specific features before going ahead.
That may be one activity that delivery undertakes in order to analyze whether their envisioned solution is appropriate or not. Yep.
I'm seeing a bunch of people that kind of sit in the middle of delivery and product. Are we going to talk about them?
Probably.
Good. Then I'm going to ask my question till the end.
So what happens in this organizational domain? Well, it's stuff that we see every day, and we often don't call it out for what it is. We just assume that it's got to happen, so it kind of happens, and so people do it. But it's really coordination, especially in large organizations where functions could be segregated. But it's things like staffing. Do we have the right people? If we don't have the right people, how are we finding them and hiring them and making them part of our organization. Funding, do we actually have enough money to do the things we dream about doing? And who's worrying about that? And is what we're doing legal?
Cut it out.
We'll see RTC looking into it now.
So compliance is a role. It differs from organization to organization, but sort of legal compliance is sort of baseline. But there may be other regulatory issues or other constraints that the organization places on itself and it wants to make sure that it's behaving. So an example that comes to mind is some fund managers advertise themselves as ethical investors. So they want to make sure that they're complying to whatever they consider to be ethical, so that they can show that to people and say, here are the kinds of companies we invest in, and here are the kinds that we don't, and here's our portfolio, that kind of stuff. Communication, of course, is at the heart of most organizations, I hope, and that's both inward-facing and outward-facing. And then there's this really important activity that happens organizationally, and that's how do we get better at what it is we do? And in some cases, that's like, how do we just get bigger? In some people's heads, bigger is better. But for other organizations, it's how do we get more efficient? How do we drive out cost? How do we get to market faster? How do we make sure that we deliver our product or our service with fewer problems? And then, of course, there's risk. And all of this gets wrapped up in a big ball, often called strategy. And I've quite a separate and expensive set of ideas around strategy, most of which are today's strategy is crap. So,
Yeah, I was just surprised that strategy is with the organization as opposed to with the product. I mean, coming from the product development world.
well, I put it here deliberately because it crosses those boundaries. But if you look at sort of any organization, it's seldom, now we'll get into some differences and some examples, but it's seldom sort of just the technical people who hold the strategy, and it's seldom just the product people who hold the strategy. It really gets all wrapped up in what are the capabilities of the organization to actually put their ideas into action. And it may be constrained by the delivery, may be constrained by their market or their product ideas, or it may be constrained by or defined by how much money we have in the bank and what the likelihood of getting more in the bank is. So it just seems to me to be a sort of organizational thing. But remember, this is a Venn diagram. So now we can start.
There'll be overlaps. I can't wait.
Can't wait.
So same kind of skills list. And again, for me, facilitation, if you can't get a group of people together and iron out their differing perspectives and their different opinions, then you're going to get stuck organizationally. You need to be able to facilitate and create alignment. So the standard kind of skill sets that you think about organizationally exist here. You need to have some capability of planning, even if it's just for tomorrow. Budgeting, some sense of how much money do we have and how much can we spend. Scheduling, being able to analyze the data that is being fed back to us, either by market or by internal folks, to help us make better decisions. And you often hear the term data-driven decisions and data-driven organizations. I hate that.
It works in hockey, though.
What's that?
It works in hockey, though.
I like data-supported decisions. I've seen some decisions supported by that have been driven by data. Like, that's what the data says, let's do X. Kind of suspect. Anyway. And again, look at these things. Visualization, communication. If you can't help people see what it is the organization is doing or where it's going, it's really hard to get alignment across all of these different domains of activity. In communication, and probably a key skill for people operating in this organizational domain is the ability to negotiate. Because there are always trade-offs to be made, always decisions with respect to priority, or timing, or sequencing, or importance that happen in this domain. Still with me?
What about the leadership, these skills?
Well, you could take two different views of leadership. I would expect some leadership to exist in the organizational domain, because it's kind of where strategy sits. But I would hope for and expect also to see some leadership from the delivery organization or part of the organization. So people focused on delivery need to have a view of how they can best fulfill the organizational goals given their constraints. And I would fully expect to see some leadership on the product definition, the vision of what it is, what our purpose is in the market. So it's not exclusively organizational in my view. Does that resonate for you? So here we are again with these domains of focus. And they overlap. Imagine that. Is that making you happier, Sue?
It is, it's making me very happy. But I'm gonna wanna see some names in those overlaps.
Okay.
There's just one thing I'm looking for, and it hasn't shown up yet, and it's really important for me, so.
Okay, well, we'll discuss that. But before we get there, depending on what kind of organization you're in, you can move these balls around. And I was going to get, no. So I was going to have a chance to move them around, but I'm going to move them around for you. So here's a typical, in my view, and you can challenge me and get me to change this easily, typical smaller product-focused organization. So this is startup, post-startup, where there's really not a lot of organizational stuff influencing product and delivery. There's somebody who's got a product vision, we're making it, we're shipping it, and oh, maybe we'll make payroll. Or, yeah, somebody's going to order those desks, but I don't know who. So you can start to characterize and use this very simple visualization tool to say, what kind of company are we? And where do these skills reside, and what are they being focused on? And maybe we don't have them. So this is one example. So here's another one. So I call this a large projectified organization. So really strong project focused organization of work. So we have the product people, they're living off there in the silo, and we have the delivery people, and we have organizational activity connecting these two things. And lots of overlap on the delivery. This organization is telling the delivery folks what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Big overlap. So this is typical, in my experience, and I'm seeing some nodding heads, of people's experience of large organizations that organize their work with projects as the container for work.
Yeah, I draw the circle of product smaller. Having worked for construction and project, truly project oriented.
Yeah, I haven't changed the size of the balls, but yeah, totally.
Because I was looking at banks there, and I wanted to make the green ball really big.
Okay, next version. Next version will have adjustable size balls. But just by moving these things around, you can start to have a conversation about how do we interact, because it's in the overlaps between these domains. that interaction actually happens. That's where people talk with one another. That's where the work gets
So in this
done.
one, product's not talking to the delivery people at all, it's all.
Only through the project,
Yeah.
only through the organization.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
So then when you have these cross-functional meetings, yeah, when the product and
Yeah.
the delivery people get together, that's not overlapping?
Well, it might not be, but in this last case, those meetings where you, as a delivery person, you might actually meet and touch the hand of a product person, they're being hosted by somebody in the middle. And God forbid that somebody in the delivery organization should actually talk to a customer who's on the outside of the
That's
product.
not allowed. Definitely not allowed.
So we can use these very simple diagrams to start to talk about things that are in our way, and things we might want to change, and what we might want to move to. So, really our goal when we're introducing Agile principles and practices is to foster much stronger communication links between product and delivery. And we do that through conversation and through visualization and through all kinds of activities that make those two domains overlap a little bit more. And we still need organizational activity on our behalf. We still need funding. We still need all of those things to happen. We just need less direct activity from the organization in the operation of delivery and the actual operation of defining product. So it's not that they don't overlap, it's we want to shift them to the appropriate level of overlap. And then we can start to define what kind of interaction is in those overlaps. So I want to go back to, okay, so here we are, the generic prototypical organization, and there's overlaps. So there's a bunch of jobs that I haven't talked about. I suspect that's what's bothering Sue. So did you have a particular skill set in
I
mind?
had two particular skill sets in mind. One was usability, user experience, whatever we're calling that.
Okay.
And the other is the product manager person who can't just sit in product by his or herself.
Okay.
So, that may not be where you're going. I don't want to introduce anything.
Well, it's maybe not where I'm going explicitly, but it's a perfect example of how you can use this tool to talk about
Yeah.
that. So where would you put a designer, a UX designer, for example, or a graphic designer, somebody who's focused on defining how our product can be best used by someone, provide the best possible experience or affordance or utility. Where would you put them on this diagram?
I put them in the middle on product and tech. Only
Here.
Because, only because the tech will determine a lot of, they could design a beautifully inserted product, but tech may be constrained.
Yeah. So I happen to agree with you. Does anybody have a different opinion?
And I can see that way. Another option, I'm just thinking in the context that the UX person would be more a designer than an architect,
Yeah.
is that it would be in the overlap area between the green and the pink, where it's like, okay, I've taken the information from the product manager, I've taken my own education, I'm not sure what education the UX person gets, but and all of the various sources, and here's the wireframe or whatever that I've come up with. And then the product manager has to go back to the customer and say, hey, this is what we think we're gonna give you in 8 weeks, or,
Yeah.
But
So,
that's the value of having the discussion of the walls.
yeah.
We would have
So-
that to be thought about.
yeah, I could possibly buy that, but I would test it with this diagram.
Where we're gonna put them on this one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
where would they be on this one? I would put them firmly in here. So there's a bunch of product people, they're not purely product because they're sitting there
Yeah.
helping delivery people think about how to design their solution.
Go ahead.
I certainly had the experience where they're in the product bubble and they're showing something over the wall.
Yeah, it's
in
a-
that
Yeah.
delivery team,
Yeah.
what you have to implement.
Yeah,
Then the
Yeah.
delivery team comes back and says, you realize you're making it look that way is gonna take us 2 months.
yeah, but just by putting this up and having a kind of discussion like this, you could say, hey, our UX people are firmly over here.
Yeah, but when we were arguing, we wanted a UX person sitting with us,
Yeah,
like in our pod.
yeah. Well,
And see, the first
so
question.
what would that look like? That would look like the UX person is completely here.
Well, see, that's what I was gonna ask, because my first question would be in that organization, okay, who's accountable for going back to the customer that says, okay, if we do this for you this way, will you be okay with that? Because if it's the usability person, then maybe it's closer into the blue or in the blue, and if it's the product owner or product manager, then it's more into the pink.
Yeah. I mean, it depends if you're talking about a customer or a user.
Yeah.
Whether it be a
Yeah.
B2C and all of this other.
Yeah, because that's to Sue's point is like it's like who's making the decision on what's right, the hippos or the people who are going to use it.
Well, and how do you have that discussion unless you have something to point at and say, what's your opinion about where somebody sits in? Do we agree that this kind of represents how these domains are inside of our company? And if we can get to that, yeah, roughly we agree, our company looks like this, then we have a scaffold, if you like, to have this discussion about where is somebody's activity best placed? Where do we see it today? Where would it be best placed? And how do we make that happen? But right now, we don't. We get into these arguments they need to be completely embedded in the delivery team, or no, they need to be completely embedded in the product.
Well, when you see smaller, do you mean like startup or somewhere in between?
I've seen startups with 10 years of history with still that very weak organizational behavior, strongly founder driven with a product vision and varying degree, move your delivery product balls almost on an annual basis, backwards and
That's really
forwards.
small.
Okay, so let's try another role that I haven't explicitly addressed. Where would you place an architect?
He works for the construction company.
It's good to have you here.
Solution or application?
You choose. So it's a distinction that doesn't
We're gonna make it
really
easy.
resonate for me. So I think architects make, the only difference between an architect and a developer in my mind is an architect makes decisions that are more difficult and expensive to undo.
Take longer.
And they have a longer time horizon for which they are accountable. So I haven't talked about time horizon, but it's near and dear to my heart in defining job differences between specific job roles. So every architect I've ever talked to thinks they should be right here. And I don't disagree. I think they need to understand the strategy of the organization. They need to understand what the demands of the product organization is given their interpretation of market and customer need and opportunity. And they need to understand what the delivery part of their organization is capable of and what is constraining them. And so if they find out from the organization that we have limitless buckets of money, we can do anything we want, then they will loosen their architectural constraints and say, we don't particularly care what technology you use. If we make a mistake, we'll just do something else. If they find out from the organization, payrolls, we might not make payroll for the next 3 months, then they're going to tightly constrain their architectural. We can't buy a new product. We can't buy whatever. There's no database upgrade coming. So optimize, or it may force you to make different delivery decisions, and that may in turn make this interaction go in a different way too. So I want X. Well, no, you can't have X because of this.
And see, that's one of the things I was hoping to get out of today, because in the conversations like you were just talking about that I've had, the first question that comes back is that, okay, if the architect is the one in the center, and when they say center, they mean dead center, what is the business analyst supposed to do? What's the requirements person supposed to do? What's this, that, and the other thing supposed to do? If the architect is the one making all the decisions on all of those things.
Well, I have this conversation more than I want to.
Yeah.
So I was working with a team, and they were handed a set of architectural requirements. And their response to that was, what are we even doing here? We've just been handed an order list. What are we? Short order cooks. Just like code the stuff, get it out. This is not what I signed up for. Has the architect actually told you how to design your code in order to provide the service that's needed? And sort of moment of silence and a reluctant, no, not really. So what has the architect done? All he's done is said, here are the boundaries. You need to use this tool. You need to use this environment. And then after that, fill your boots. You design and code the solution. But you don't get to pick whether it's Cloud Foundry or AWS or Bob's server under his desk. You need to use this environment. So, and that might be a wrong and a very expensive decision, but that's what architects are paid for, is to make those kinds of decisions on behalf of what? The organization.
Yeah.
So they sit right in the middle.
Yeah, because it's the RASI model, right? It's like, just because the architect is the one that's accountable doesn't mean the business analysts don't have anything to do anymore.
Another skill of an architect is ability to defer decisions.
Yeah, well, that in some cases I would agree with you, but in other cases deferring the decision has a cost that maybe the organization's not happy about.
Yeah, you defer as reasonable as possible.
Yeah. Okay. So is this useful? We're all going to go and start drawing big ball Venn diagrams with every whiteboard that you can find?
It's an original point of view.
So we, I hope, shifted the focus from these job labels that we associate with these kind of domains to what work actually gets done, what skills do we need to do that work? So then that begs the question, okay, so how do we talk about that?
So Andrew, is your point that we don't want to talk about, we need 3 BAs on this team. We want to talk about, we need people who have these skills,
Correct.
right? So we really have to shift our brain from that old HR hierarchy, label, to skill,
Yeah.
and what is the work?
So typically, I mean, the communities that I have these conversations with most often are business analysts and project managers.
Because they don't see their picture on the board.
Because their label isn't there. But the work is going nowhere.
Yeah.
The work still needs to be done. So now we have a way of describing in what domain is that work? And what skills do you need in order to perform that work? And it will vary from organization to organization, but now we can move the balls around and say, well, this kind of looks like us. Here's the interaction. What skills do we need in there? Who has those skills? And my answer to the BAs is, you could rule the world.
Yeah.
Look at where you are. You're right in that intersection between delivery and product. And what skills do you have as a business analyst? Well, you're fantastic at facilitation and eliciting needs and gathering opinion and making sense out of it for the rest of the organization. It sounds like a pretty controlling position to me. And they go, but, there's no BA in this world. So, yes, there is. You have all of these skills. We might not label it that. Or we may leave that job title in place, but call the role that you're doing something else. So we need to break that linkage between the role that I perform and the label that's on my job are one and the same. And I think it's through using this kind of visualization technique and forcing that kind of conversation that we can start to crack that open a little bit. So there's some interesting ways to get people to focus on exposing their skills, if you like. And I think this is a critical practice for teams. Irrespective of whether they're a delivery team, it doesn't matter what kind of work you're doing. And it's a very simple exercise called market of skills or marketplace of skills. So I like to teach teams this, and it leads to something that I think is critical for a team to have, and that's a skills matrix. So the next three things I'm going to talk about are marketplace of skills as an activity, skills matrix as an artifact, and then what that leads you into, which is something really important, which is skill liquidity. So the market of skills is very interesting kind of activity for a team to take on. And the idea is that everyone in a team is setting up a stall at a marketplace. And they need to do a couple of things. They need to sell their wares. They need to be able to describe what skill am I bringing to this marketplace. So there's the obvious ones, they're the ones that are useful to the team and they kind of go on top of the table. But everybody knows at every market there's some extra secret goodies under the table, right? So it might not be the thing that's most important to the team or what the team thinks, but it could be very interesting to the team. And so I might be able to test some code, but I can sing too. That can help. But more importantly, I can brew coffee.
I'm saying something else, but
We are a brewery.
I can prepare. Whatever that might be. But now we're starting to get a better sense of what do people bring to the team that they're on. That might not be traditionally what we think of as most important. But have you ever been on a team where you're not quite sure what this person does, but whenever they go on holiday, things don't work quite so well? I've been on a couple of teams like that. There's people who just are glue. Anyway. So this is also an opportunity for people to sort of expose, what is it that I don't know that I want to learn about? And that can build some connection between the team. So you can do this, posters on a wall, you have people write down, you can have people actually build miniature market stalls around the table. Doesn't particularly matter. I've represented this just as sticky notes on a table. And that's really all you need to know. It's kind of an interesting exercise. And I know that Sue does it a lot. Have you done it?
I've done it
Anne-Marie?
lots of times. Have you done it? Yeah.
Anybody else in the crowd ever
I
seen?
haven't done an exercise, but I do have a Confluence page with all the team members and has like their names, their role, areas of expertise, so that's
Yeah.
pretty useful to team, and then what makes you interesting.
Okay.
So it's like, it's basically
Yeah.
collecting the same information, but
Yeah.
it was more of a, and then I had like the first pod that everyone finished up.
I've done it where we've actually had, construction paper and big pipe cleaners on messages, and I can think of like solid, serious, scary, straight programmers putting little hangers on their store with price tags on things and stuff like parental advice, $10, and just like crazy creative stuff came out. People that I had sort of not expected that from. It was really fun to do. And then another one, we found that we had enough people to do a proper rock band, just with their various instruments that they played, because of course, math is a music.
It was really interesting for, so I met a company where some of the people have been there for about 15 years,
Yeah.
and they learn things about each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then other people who just like, one person at one makes it interesting, like wrote NA, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, that tells me something about you, even if you don't want to share it, like you're probably.
And you choose what you're going to share.
That's okay,
Yeah.
right?
So this is a very simple exercise, can be done in a number of different ways. It's a way of gathering data about the team. So how do we make sense of that data? Well, we can build a skill matrix. So this is what Michelle has just described. We can, it's a very simple thing. Here are all the people, here are all of the skills. And it could be the skills that they've chosen to share, or you can use this same matrix to say, these are the skills I need in order to do the work that people have given, that expect from us. So you might go along here and say, I need a Java struts programmer, and I need some PHP expert, or I need somebody, experienced with Mongo, or whatever the tech platform you're on. You can say, I need somebody who does that. And just by a very simple rating system, you can see how experienced people are. And so this particular example is kind of not very, well, it is informative. But you can do something as simple as, I haven't got a clue, I've done this once, I can teach people how to do this. It can be as simple as that. Because then you know where you have opportunities to generate some learning inside your own team. If somebody is so skilled at doing something that they could stand up and hold a class in that particular skill, then wow, if you have somebody in your team that says, I'm not very experienced with this, or I don't know anything about it, then they could hold a workshop or pair them together, which is kind of
The other thing that I was thinking that, as you say that, is we also know if we've got all of one skill in one person who could win the lottery next week and be gone.
yeah. So it's a way of mitigating risk. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But here's a team I don't want to be on because there's no one who knows how to make coffee. Or maybe this is a team that I could really help out
Because
because I know how to make coffee. But it's just a way of exposing in a single place what is the capability of the team. And people who are locked into their job title now can break that out and say, hey, I can do all of these things. These are the skills I have. It's not the job title I have. And make them visible and become valuable to teams in different ways. So it's really this shift from focus on job label and assuming that, oh, if I have this job label and I have this certification, I can do all that stuff. Well, what is that stuff? And what else is there? Because there's always what else is there. So skills liquidity is the ability of people to do multiple jobs. And I know that this is sometimes a contentious issue. And we talk, who's heard the term T-shaped people? So we talk about T-shaped people as having not just a specialty, deep specialty, skill that they bring to a team, but also some breadth. So yes, I'm a tester, but I can maybe write a half-assed business requirement if I needed to, or I can write a story. I'll be really awesome in the test acceptance criteria, but I might not be so good in the description. It might take me twice as long as a business analyst, but I could still do it if push came to shove. Or, hey, I'm an analyst, I don't know anything about testing, but if there's a time crunch or lots of demand and a little bit of help, I could maybe help the testers on our team get through their backlog, their personal backlogs.
T-shaped question, so kind of like, jack of all trades, master of maybe something?
Well, I think that's a good way to characterize it.
Okay. No, I'm just trying to make sure I understand my own mind.
Yes.
Okay.
But critical here is master of something. People who get exercised and don't like this idea very much tend to take it to the extreme and say, oh, we all have to be able to do everyone else's job at the same level of competence and capacity, and then what does that mean to me, special snowflake tech god? If everybody else can do what I can do, then why bother? But that's never going to happen.
Another question?
Yes.
So, say there's a fifth person, Harry,
Yeah.
that has all quadrants colored.
Yep.
And Harry's on vacation. We need something done. And Bob and Mary have a couple of quadrants each.
Yep.
Maybe the matrix says, well, if I get Bob and Mary to work on this while Harry's on vacation, I can still get something done.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's the heart of skill liquidity in your team. You have the ability, not at the same level of competence, not at the same speed, but if somebody goes missing for whatever reason, let them go missing, let them go on vacation, or they've just gone missing, you're not stuck. You're not blocked. And that's the notion of, that's why we use the word liquidity. You can maintain flow through the team if you have that kind of thing. So, anybody recognize this?
I haven't been on it.
Federation Bridge. So, what do you see when you look at that bridge? See a bunch of specialists. I hold things up. So they're not much good unless there's a deck. So I look at this and I just see T-shaped things all the way across, right? Oops. So here are your specialists, and they only become useful when you span those things. So this is an awesome situation where things flow very easily through the team, but I could just as easily have made those T's a little bit smaller, and there's some rough handoffs between specialists and people who are on teams who want team life to get better will focus on making sure that we can make work flow through our team more effectively. So the idea behind here is the idea of skill liquidity, being able to promote flow through the team by having your specialty, yes, but being able to have some breadth to your contribution as well. So there we are, 6:30 on the nose. I hope this has been a little bit thought-provoking. So thanks for all of the feedback. And if you have some ideas about how to improve this, please don't hold back. As I said, it's a simple idea, refocusing people, visualizing the way in which they can make a contribution to the org, and eliciting that and making it visible even within the team with this simple marketplace of skills and skills matrix. So I think the team is really doing itself a disservice if it can't put up a skills matrix and say, here's my team and here's what they're capable of doing. And even if that reveals horrible gaps and things that are filled in by contractors or whatever the case may be, at least you know where you have opportunities to share and grow and improve the team generally. If it can feed requests for additional staff, it can do all kinds of good things in that organizational domain. But if you just say, I need more people, and you can't answer the question why, what benefit will that be, or what gap does that fill, then it becomes a more difficult conversation. If you have this kind of visualization, it's just so much easier. Anyway, thanks a lot.
Two things. Anyone else here going to the Toronto Agile Conference next week?
Yeah.
Details.
Details?
I didn't even know it was on.
There's a Toronto Agile
I think
Conference
there's
next
still
Tuesday.
tickets.
You can probably still get tickets for $200. Sorry, so who else is that?
Where can you find more info?
Google.
Toronto Agile Conference, okay?
Then you'll be going to Winnipeg to deliver?
Okay, so
Yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah, and they put on a conference every year.
Okay.
And then open space in the spring.
Yeah, and an open space in the spring. So their annual conference with like keynotes and workshops and everything is this next Tuesday. Yeah, I don't know if they're still on.
I was
That's why
on
we
the
moved
website
this one
today.
up.
It looked to
Because
be
I knew
like there were
about
still some
project work and
tickets.
all that kind of stuff.
It looked to me like there were still some tickets. I was at their site today.
So that's happening. If anyone else is interested, I'll be taking the GO train. And then the other thing I just wanted to let everyone know, we don't have a speaker yet for November.
Okay, community? Yeah, they're sold out. Oh. Yeah, no, I see, thank you. But it's sold out. He just.
Oh, it's sold out, okay. So there was still a ticket today.
So, yeah, but we don't have a speaker yet for November, so if anyone has anything they might want to present to the group, please let me or Lisa know. And let me know sooner rather than later, because I might try to find someone at the conference next week that would come down. So, yes, and I think we'll probably cancel for December. We'll talk to Lisa about that, yeah, I thought so, yeah. Everyone's so busy in December with holiday stuff, right? So-
Holidays.